All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Daniel here with Cop Watch TV. Thank you so much for joining our live event. This is our opportunity to interact with the audience and to not only talk about some of the issues and stories that are happening in the police world, but to also in real time go over some questions and comments. So we're going to shout out a couple people. We asked where people are watching from. So we have Dave Freed from Michigan, Marcos Lopez from Arizona, and Trax Dutch from Europa. That's great. And I think we have some people from Tennessee and Kentucky as well. So just want to welcome everybody here. Joplin, Missouri. Joplin, I've driven through there. Great. And we have Polygraph from Wisconsin. Nice to see some people from the Midwest in here as well. So again, my name is Daniel with Cop Watch TV. You can go ahead and follow me at Police Law News, either at YouTube or on TikTok. I do daily stories. But today we're going to go over, a roadmap of kind of where we're going today is the three biggest stories that really got the most interest this week. We're going to do a little bit on the Uvalde school shooting. So the chief of the police of the Texas Uvalde School District, he finally gave a public statement. So we're going to go over some of his statements and really some of his excuses. Also, there were 31 members of a right-wing white supremacist group called Patriot Front arrested in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho last weekend at a Pride event. So we're going to talk about that. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is a case where, not surprisingly, a good guy with a gun stopped a possible mass shooting incident at a summer camp in Dallas. So, while I'm going through these stories, if you have questions or comments, we definitely like to get everybody involved. If you do a super chat, that'll obviously get to the front. We'd love to see that, and we can definitely get that comment heard. But we really want to hear from everybody on here about just thoughts, opinions, questions, and again, so here we go. So the first case, so kind of before we get to those three main cases, I'm just going to do a couple minutes on the swimming case, the water rescue case of Sean Bickenings in Tempe, Arizona. Now, we've gone through this a bunch of times, and the main thing about this is the police officers didn't jump into the water after Sean Bickenings, and there was some controversy about that. So I thought about this a lot, and there's been a lot of chat and talk about it, and really I just want to say that if we want police officers to know how to do water rescue, I'm not saying that that's a bad idea. But we have to do a couple things. So we have to train police officers how to do that. We have to give them equipment such as flotation devices in order to successfully complete a water rescue. And then also we have to have, I know this maybe sounds basic, we have to have some kind of a plan for police officers to secure their duty equipment. Because one of the issues with this is we know officers can't jump in the water with 30 pounds of gear on. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And they can't just leave all their gear, their gun on the pier for anybody to grab. So there has to be some kind of a plan in place for what to do with duty gear if you go into the water. So I think those three things have to happen. For police departments who do want officers to do this, the best way to do anything is to incentivize it. So police departments already, if you're in SWAT, in the DUI unit, in traffic, bombs, if you have extra training in crisis intervention, or you are bilingual, a lot of police departments, officers who have those extra skills, pay them a small stipend, $25 a paycheck, $50 a paycheck, something to incentivize it. Or it could be something where if you take this water rescue training, maybe that gets you points towards a sergeant test, towards a detective test, or maybe it's a prerequisite to go to SWAT or bombs. So those are just some of my thoughts on, what police departments do when it comes to water rescue, instead of just, we're going to call the fire department and we're going to request a boat, which probably isn't going to get there until it's too late to save someone. So if you have any thoughts about some of those ideas I had, I'd like to hear about it. So definitely go ahead and put it in the chat. And so the first case we're going to talk about is, so Todd Kavanaugh asked, usually police have their vehicles outfitted for any emergencies. Yes, but I mean, it would really depend where you are. So if you're working up in Maine where there's moose and bear, you might have different things and different tools to deal with that. If you work in Tempe, Arizona, you might have different tools to deal with different types of things. So definitely not all police agencies and police officers are outfitted with the same types of equipment. If you think about it this way, a state police officer in a rural state, they might be 45 minutes away from any backup. So it's more likely that those types of officers might have AR-15s and, ballistic shields. Whereas a city police officer who backup is 30 seconds away might not be outfitted with all of those different tools and different types of equipment. So yes, whatever the citizens and the police department wants police officers to have, we should equip those officers with it so they can handle emergencies appropriately. Okay, so when it comes to Uvalde, so also there were, so in that Tempe case, officers were, I think, 40 yards away from the individual, so he wasn't close to shore. When it comes to Uvalde, so Pete Arredondo, he is the chief of police of the Uvalde Public School District, and he is the one who really people are blaming for, the response for the tragic school shooting. And obviously we've gone over it before. The school shooting was problematic. The response was just awful from police. So Pete Arredondo, he hasn't done any media interviews until around June 9th. He actually did a phone interview with the Texas Tribune. And on June 9th, the Texas Tribune, they published an article basically documenting that. And in it, I read that article, and Pete Arredondo, he said three main takeaways that I have from this that he said about why this happened and kind of how his actions were. So the first one that I just find extremely strange is that Pete Arredondo said that he was one of the first officers to arrive on scene, which makes sense. The Uvalde Public School District Police is a police department of 6 officers, and then him as the chief. So he was one of the first to respond, and this is the crazy thing he said. He said that he purposely left his radio in the car. He said he didn't want the radio to slow him down or get the radio to slow him down. He also made some comments about not being able to manipulate both his gun and his radio. So anyone in law enforcement or who follows law enforcement, this is an absolutely insane thing to say. So just first of all, you don't have a radio clip. There's no proper way to carry a radio and a gun. This seems extremely poor planning, if that's the case. He also, when you're in an emergency, besides a gun, one of the most important things that a police officer can have is their radio. This is how officers can not only distribute information that they're seeing to dispatch, to relay to other resources and to coordinate, but also this is how officers receive information. So, maybe one of the reasons that Pete Arredondo said he didn't know that there were school children and teachers who were alive and possibly needing medical aid in the room with the shooter, he said he just didn't know that was the case. Well, maybe it's because he didn't have a radio. So this is one of the reasons why this is just very, very basic. And another thing that he said that I find infuriating is he said that, well, it wouldn't have mattered if I brought a radio because radios don't work in the school anyways. Radios don't work in the school? Well, during a school shooting seems like a strange time to bring that up. Who's the chief of police? Who's in charge? So has Pete Arredondo, before this happened, has he brought this up to the city council that he's now sitting on? Has he brought this up to the city council, to members of the government, to members of the public? Like, hey, just so you know, our police radios do not work inside the schools. It just seems a very strange time to bring that up when there's an active school shooting. So I think that was one of the main things that he said that I found to be very strange and frankly frustrating. He also said that one of the things that prevented officers when they were in the hallway to getting into the classroom is they couldn't breach that door. Now, the Uvalde Public School District Police, again, it's a small department of 6 officers. I wouldn't expect them to have the most advanced breaching tools. Like, I think it's reasonable that they wouldn't. But what about a key? So he said that he had to have multiple different janitors come by with these giant key rings. He said the key ring weighed like 10 pounds, and he's trying different keys, almost like this is like a bad sitcom episode from the 90s, that, he's trying different keys and he's not able to get in. So the keys aren't labeled. neither the janitors or the police department knows which key opens which door. Again, the time to find that out during a school shooting is absolutely insane. So even if we're absolutely going to criticize the police officers, how they acted and what they did in the moment, but there should be a lot of criticism also when it comes to planning. Radios don't work, and you don't know how to get into a classroom. The keys aren't labeled. There's no master key. That's absolutely insane. Also, one of the other things he said is that he was surprised that he was the incident commander. He didn't know that he was the incident commander. So he's the chief of police, and he's one of the first on scene. And he didn't know that he was the incident commander. All these media interviews and the news calling him the incident commander, he said that's the first time he's heard of it. Well, if you're the chief of police and the first one on scene, who else would be the incident commander? And, I guess it's one of those things where, I guess if you don't have a working radio to communicate with the 5 other police law enforcement agencies who are arriving on scene, so if you don't have a radio to communicate with them, yeah, I guess it would make it difficult to know who is the incident commander. But the assumption that he is the incident commander, that would be the assumption. So these are the things that that I think are just extremely frustrating is the word that I would read. So we just had a comment. Someone said that there's only 6 police officers, and I think there's a couple. There's like 6 different schools. There's not 100 schools in this school district. There's a couple different schools. I think that there's 6 schools. So again, the idea of not knowing how to get into classrooms is extremely crazy. And one of the things that not only we have been working on, but a lot of other media agencies have also been working on is obviously trying to get the body cam footage of what happened that day. So we want the body cam footage, and not only the body cam footage, but also the cell phone footage. So Pete Arredondo said that when he was in that hallway, the only way he was communicating with dispatch was on his cell phone. Well, I think I'm not the only one who wants to know what was said on that cell phone. If he was calling dispatch or emergency communications, that should be recorded. That should be public information as well, even if it's a personal phone. So one of the problems when it comes to IPRA laws, and these are the types of laws, essentially public information laws, where police, where news agencies and the media can get copies of body camera footage and different things that are public information that our public servants do. So every state has different IPRA laws. Texas is notorious for not having journalist or media-friendly IPRA laws. So we're already operating in a venue that isn't friendly to media when it comes to this, and we have this situation where it's going to make a lot of people look bad, and they're going to be apprehensive to let it go, to not let it out anyways. So essentially what the Attorney General of Texas, I believe his name is Ken Paxton, what the Attorney General of Texas is saying when it comes to the release of the body cam videos is he's saying no, and he's citing an ongoing investigation. Now, a couple things on that. So let's say the shooter was alive, and the shooter was going to go to trial, and they said, because of trial purposes, there's a lot of body cam footage that we're going to use in prosecution, so we're not going to put it out publicly because we have witnesses, they could list all these reasons. I would almost have sympathy, not for all the video, but I would have sympathy for that, or I would at least understand the line of thinking. But there is no trial. There is no offender who's going to be, at least when it comes to the school shooter. He's dead. So there's no ongoing criminal action against the shooter. So to me, that excuse is just baffling of why they would not want to release. I know that I don't want to release it, but that's the public excuse that they're giving. So like I said, our Copwatch TV, as well as I'm sure hundreds of other media organizations, are trying to get the body camera footage. And believe it, as soon as the body camera footage is available, it is going to be on Copwatch TV immediately. And we're going to come in here and do a breakdown of it as soon as possible. So what kind of questions or comments do we have about some of these issues that we talked about here in Uvalde, Texas? So like I said, Pete Arredondo, Slippery Pete basically gave 3 different excuses for what happened. And you can read the article at the Texas Tribune. There's more to it, but those were the big 3 takeaways. And they're like the word I keep thinking about is frustrating. Not only the actions in the moment, but everything that led up to it. One other thing, Pete Arredondo also didn't have his body armor. For some reason, his body armor wasn't on. So he left it in the car. So no body armor and no radio. So I think a reasonable question that a lot of people are asking is, what was he doing before the shooting where he's seemingly not dressed up and ready to go? Okay, so let's see what some of the comments are about this. All right. Someone said, I'm pretty sure radios work in most places. I'm pretty sure that radios work in some places too. And if you are a police department for a school district, it would seem really the only place that you would want radios to work are in the schools. So again, this is extremely infuriating. So kicking fate, what kind of a comment do we have here? I think, let's see, any police officer that leaves children sites to die while they stay outside with full body armor on and armed to the teeth, fully trained, this kind is, okay. So there's frustration about the reaction and response from the police officers. So let's say that I'm not saying we believe Pete Arredondo, but let's say we believe Pete Arredondo that through his poor planning and incompetence, he didn't have a radio. So the calls that were coming into dispatch, he didn't know that there were kids and everybody in there, and they're in the hallway. Well, again, it's not having a radio to be able to know this information is extremely frustrating. And because he was the incident commander, reasonably, whether he somehow didn't know that, every other officer there would have been listening to him. And like I said, the idea of not having radio is insane. Vincent Ranger, he needs to resign immediately. What a disgrace. Absolutely. But instead of resigning, he was sworn into the city council a week after this happened. So let's see. So we had a poll up. Is Chief Pete Arredondo incompetent as a police officer? So we've got 88% of people saying yes. So I'm curious why it isn't 100%. So though there are some voices out there who don't think that he's incompetent, I'm always interested to see what the other side says. So if anyone has an idea of why they think that his actions were not appropriate, but even reasonable, please put it in the chat, and I'd like to do some honest discussion about some of those issues. Cannon Rep says, thank you for this content. Well, thank you, Cannon Rep. And if you want to make sure that you still get the content, make sure you like, subscribe, and type on the notifications for Cop Watch TV. That way every time we're going to do this, and we're pretty much going to do it on Fridays. And we do have one of our biggest fans, and you should actually follow their channel as well because it's unbelievable. It's called Only Cop. So Only Cop says if he didn't know, he should assume. Oh my goodness. He said if Only Cops, where'd you go? If he didn't know, he should have assumed that there's no one left to save either. Exactly. No, that's an absolutely something to say. So Only Cops, they are former police officers in Texas, and so they have some firsthand knowledge of kind of what's going on there. So thank you for that comment. Also, Turtle Lookalike Urkel. All right, we have a super chat. So thank you so much for that, Turtle Lookalike Urkel super chat. I appreciate that. He said, "What if the cops just wanted to take him in alive?" So that's a reasonable. So that's a good question. Let me explore that for a second. So if the cops wanted to take him in alive, well, first of all, that wouldn't be the goal of any normal trained reasonable police officers. That isn't the goal. If you can take someone in alive, I mean, great. Police officers, no matter what the situation is, unless someone is posing a deadly immediate threat, you can't use deadly force. But still, the goal from a normal, reasonable trained police officer would be to get into the room and save the kids and the teachers and any innocent victim. And when you get in there, if bad guy puts his hands up and isn't armed anymore and surrenders, well, great, you can take him in alive. But the lives of the victims saving as many of those as possible is always going to be the goal. So I don't think that anyone thought, okay, we're not going to go in because we want to take this guy alive. Really, an argument could be made that the longer this goes on, the more carnage he creates, the more damage he does, really, the less likely it is that he's going to be taken alive. So, even if that was I don't think it was, but even if that was the goal and the thinking of the police officers, I still think that the way to achieve that would be to get in there as quickly as possible. Like I said, the more damage you let him do, the more likely it is that he's not going to go in alive because he's just in this too deep. All right, so thank you so much for that question. That was a really, really good question. So someone asked, Uvalde screwed up bad, completely went against protocol for an active shooter. You're 100% correct. They did go against the protocol of an active shooter. Again, we've talked about the protocol for an active shooter is once you get on scene, whether you're 1 police officer, 2 or 10, as soon as you get there, you go in, you go towards the gunfire, because the thinking is that even if as a police officer, you have to be willing to go in to risk your life. And the thinking is that even if bad guys start shooting at me, all right, I have a weapon, I have body armor, I can somehow protect myself. And if he's shooting at me, he's not shooting at kids. And that has to be the thinking. And that is the training. And anything else from a police officer and an active shooter is not acceptable. And we're going to kind of Jen Psaki circle back to that idea of an active shooter in the third story that we get to. So let's see if we have any other questions about that. I'd definitely like to go ahead. And get to those. So also we do have one more thing about like the IPRA and the Texas. So we do have a rejection letter. So we did send in to Ken Paxton, Attorney General. Here is a rejection letter from the Attorney General of Texas. All right. So basically denying the request for a dash cam. And this is for a different case from January, but I just want to show you that that's an example of the different IPRA laws in the different states. So, we as a media organization, we have tried to get body cam and dash cam from Texas, and this is for a different case that is not as high profile, and we still have a difficult time getting it. So I think we've done it 30 or so times in Texas, and they've all been denied. So my prediction is eventually we are going to see this body cam. It could take a while, but eventually the people have a right to know what their public servants are doing while they are on duty. All right, so here we go to the next case I'm going to talk about is a case that happened in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So this was last week. There was a pride event at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And there's a group called Patriot Front. So doing something I never thought I'd do, doing a little bit of research on Patriot Front, which is a right-wing white supremacist group. And the best research I can find is that they started in the Dallas, Texas area kind of in 2017 after Charlottesville. Now, I've read some reports that they were a loosely affiliated group. Then Charlottesville happened, and then they had to rebrand themselves. So somehow the current form of Patriot Front is, what they think is a good rebranding initiative. But so it's hard to say. It's like, did the whole group start after Charlottesville, or were they something else? And then after Charlottesville, then the race riot, the Unite the Right nonsense in Charlottesville in 2017. Then they rebranded to Patriot Front. Either way. This is an interesting case because it touches on issues like free speech, which I think are just incredibly interesting. So I'd like to know everybody's thoughts on this case, and not just this case in Coeur d'Alene, but some of the bigger issues that this talks about. And this is what I mean by that. Oh, okay. So Shink asked, Patriot Front are feds? No, I'm going to get into that. I don't think so. And it's not just because, so we are going to show a picture. How about we do that now? Producer Nick, can you show a picture of the 31 people who were arrested in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? So these look like 31 really just inbred crazy people. They do not look like feds. If you go to So we're getting tons of questions. So if you really need something answered, you can put it in the you can use the super chat option. We are getting a lot of comments. Want to get to as many as possible, but if you put it in the super chat, then we can guarantee that one gets answered. It'll go to the top of the line. So definitely think about that. But if you look at an FBI academy. That's not what these Patriot Front people look like. So we're going to get a picture of that up. But so what happened was there was a Pride event over the weekend in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and one of our producers here on set is actually from that area, so was able to give some more information on a lot of what's happening out there. And I guess that there were in the 90s in this area of Idaho that there were white supremacist groups who used to get together and parade around and celebrate Hitler's birthday. So I'm only mentioning that is because this part of Idaho does have some, I'll call it strange and controversial history when it comes to some of these awful right-wing white supremacist groups. So okay, there was a Pride event like there was all over the country last weekend. And at the Pride event, there was a call for service to the police department. And this was just, I believe it was a worker at a hotel. But what the worker called into local police and said that there are multiple people dressed up in gear, and it looks like they are preparing to do something, all getting into the back of a U-Haul. Well, a reasonable police department would look into that. So a reasonable police officer would, so the police department went, long story short, they did a traffic stop, and there's all kinds of cell phone video about the arrest where, the police stopped the U-Haul, and they're open at the back of the U-Haul, and 31 of these people come out, and essentially, they're all arrested. Now, they're arrested for a misdemeanor, and it was conspiracy to riot. So conspiracy to riot is a misdemeanor. And so basically so I had to go back to my law school books because I haven't had this in a while, but when it comes to conspiracy crimes, what you typically have to have is two or more people who are, for lack of a better term, thinking about doing something criminal. They have a plan together. And then it's not just talking about it. There has to be one step in furtherance of that act. So, if we think, okay, so they were obviously talking about it, and then going to this town in Idaho, getting dressed up in their whatever kind of clothes they wear, with their gear, with their equipment, and all going into the back of a U-Haul the day of the Pride event. So any one of those things could be seen as, at least for an arrest for probable cause of in furtherance of that act. So, police officers basically arrested them. So I just want to talk. So if it were feds, and I know we have a couple people in here saying the feds, so we have to think about it this way. If it were feds, here's what would have happened. If one of them was a fed, or if one of them was an informant, and maybe there was, it's extremely possible that we don't have all the information yet, and believe me, as soon as we get it, we're going to get it out to you, but that maybe the public doesn't have all the information. But let's think that someone in there was an informant with the federal government. Well, what would have happened is there would have been a phone call. Hey, listen, these crazy guys, and also, hey, we have requested the body cam footage of this, so the body cam footage is a little bit delayed, but as soon as we get it, we're absolutely going to put it out there. But if you think about it, if there was a fed in there, there would have been a phone call. So, and it's like, hey, we're with this group, we're embedded, and these guys, they're doing something crazy. So if that was the case, that would have been the probable cause. Like, that would have been what was used in order to arrest them. So essentially, you wouldn't have needed a citizen who just happened to call in to say, hey, look at what these guys are doing. Local police get there. So I guess my point is that if there was someone embedded, the arrest probably would have happened maybe the day before, maybe as these guys entered Idaho, probably not once they're all in the U-Haul, driving over to the Pride event. So I'm just saying that, like, if that was the case, and if local police, now there's always the possibility that local police and the federal government aren't working together. So maybe there was an informant in there, but also that, local police, it just happened to work out this way. So like I said, I don't think that these people are feds, but you never know if one of them happened to be an informant. But the interesting part of this is is, okay, so they essentially weren't arrested for rioting. They were arrested for conspiracy to riot. So what they might do. So even if, and I think everybody agrees, these people have bad ideas. We don't like their ideas. We don't like their thoughts. We don't, that's the best way I can put it. We don't like these bad ideas. But the government cannot and should not arrest people just because of bad ideas. So that's some of the criticism that we're getting right now, or that the police department is getting in general, is that, and you know, the attorney for some of these Patriot Front people who basically said that, you know, they hadn't committed a crime yet, and this is thought crime, you know, that this is, they were doing, whether we like it or not, and everybody doesn't, we don't like their speech, but the idea, their attorney is saying, but the idea that they can't go in public to say this, that's problematic. That's a violation of the First Amendment. And I think that's a really interesting thing. So when it comes to these First Amendment cases, the best way to kind of think about these in big picture is not, is to look at it like if it was someone that you agreed with. So if it was someone that you agreed with, would you want police officers to do this? Maybe you're a supporter of Black Lives Matter. Maybe you're a supporter of Antifa, or maybe you are a supporter of either a pro-life group or a pro-choice group. Well, if there's the idea of we're going to some type of event that is for the opposition, and we're going there and we're going to scream and yell and hold up signs, the idea that you can be arrested for that, I think a lot of people have a problem with that. We should also say that, you know, so they kind of, again, like I said earlier, they dealt with this issue in the 90s. So the Coeur d'Alene City Council actually had to approve a parade permit for the Aryan Brotherhood, you know, for a demonstration that they did in the 90s based on First Amendment grounds. So you know, I'll be, just because it's the law of conspiracy to riot, just because it's on the books in Coeur d'Alene, doesn't mean it's constitutional. So you know, there's obviously no sympathy for the crazy people in Patriot Front. No sympathy at all, and I think that the local police officers, knowing what they had, probably did the right thing in the moment. But the bigger issue, the bigger picture of what do we do with groups of people who have ideas that we don't like? You know, should we arrest them? Again, in the summer of 2020, there were protests that caused billions of dollars of damage all around the country. And not that I can remember, that as people were driving to these riots or to these protests, people weren't getting arrested en masse by police officers beforehand, before they rioted. So I think that's an interesting question, and I think it's something that local and city governments are going to have to do. But I definitely expect challenges on the First Amendment, on First Amendment grounds for all these groups. So let's see what people have in the chat about some of the thoughts about this particular case. And again, most of the, I know a lot of comments we have about that these people were feds. And again, it's always possible. We just haven't seen any evidence of that yet. So if it comes out, we'll be extremely curious to see if that's the case. Let's see. So MS Love says, I love your channel. Well, thank you so much. If there's any specific content or cases that you want, definitely leave a comment, and we try to be put out content that the viewers like and think is interesting. Let's see. So Alex Duke says, it is just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's okay for them to be arrested. This is America. The cost of free speech is your feelings. They don't matter. Freedom of speech is more important. So I like that comment, because I pretty much agree. I always say in my private life, and then also when I do videos and live streams, that, you know, I'm pretty much a First Amendment absolutist. That if there are bad ideas, and again, I can't say it enough, Patriot Front is a group that has bad ideas. We all, like 99% of normal people, whether you are left or right, do not like the ideas of Patriot Front. So what do we do when there are bad ideas? And, you know, should there be thought crime? Should there be like a minority report pre-crime? Or should bad ideas, should bad speech, is the answer to that more speech? Let's get one of these Patriot Front guys out there and let's have someone reasonable who's knowledgeable on the other side. Let them talk for 20 minutes. And yeah, 99% of the people in the country are going to agree with the reasonable person and not the racist white supremacist. But I think what you were getting at is the idea of free speech. The idea of that is more important than any singular bad idea that people are going to talk about. And if that's your comment, I agree with you 100%. Now, in the moment, law enforcement who are trying to prevent a riot and to keep people safe, especially if there is a law, which again, the police didn't write the law, but especially if there is a law like that on the books, in the moment, I understand why the police officers did what they did. And especially because there's a law on the books, I think that they likely did the right thing in that scenario. And if people have a problem with it, they can go ahead and challenge that law in court, and it'll be up to a court to see if it is constitutional or not. And those are some issues I think are extremely interesting. So we do have a poll up that says, should police have arrested the Patriot Front people? So let's see what you think. Should they have been arrested in the moment or not? Then I kind of gave some context of what local law enforcement might have been thinking, and then some of the greater free speech issues that, in the moment, while there's a pride parade going on and 31 people that might riot, it's difficult for police officers in the moment to kind of think about some of those larger issues, especially if there's already a law on the books. So a lot of police departments do training, and they have a plan in place when it comes to a lot of these, if there's a pride parade or if there's any type of, and the pride parade wasn't a protest, but, you can imagine a situation where there is a protest going on. So anytime that there's an event, a lot of times you get people who feel the exact opposite. Maybe it's a pro-life event or or the women's rights event. You get groups on the other side who think the opposite way. And that's where a lot of the problem comes in. Most of the time, people say, we're going to meet at Civic Plaza at 3 p.m. and we're going to stand around and we're going to march and we're going to do signs. A lot of the time, those go safely and peacefully, which is the goal of police departments, to protect, everybody who is peacefully protesting. The problem and the issue for law enforcement, as you can imagine, is when the opposition group comes in and then there's a clash between the two groups. So police departments do typically train for that. There is training, there's education, there is a plan in place. Hey, what do we do if 18 members of Patriot Front come? Who knows if that's what they were thinking in Coeur d'Alene or if they were even expecting this. But, there typically is a plan in place for a counter demonstration and how police officers deal with that. Now, again, it is important to say that, people who have a counter demonstration, their right to free speech is just as valid and just as true as the individuals who are doing the initial demonstration or parade or the initial protest. But those are some big picture, interesting free speech issues. Darth Vader 1701, yes, freedom of speech is absolute. I love that thinking. It's not absolute, so you can't, and I think you probably know, but you can't threaten people. You can't yell fire in a theater. So you can't do things like that. But just talking about what's your opinion, you can't incite a riot. You can't tell other people, hey, go over there and start, in committing criminal acts. But the idea of freedom of speech, I think, is more important for us to hold that than to suppress any ideas that we all agree are bad. And the ELG says fighting words, etc. Yeah, that's exactly correct. Thank you. So let's see if we have any other comments about that in the chat. And yeah, people keep saying that Patriot Front were mostly feds. And so I think this is, I think this is a situation where, if you look at where Governor Whitmer in Michigan, when the kidnapping plot to kidnap her last year, it came out in trial that, and I can't remember exactly how many of these people were there, but it was like a good portion of this group were either feds or were FBI informants. So I think especially when we have an incident like, and again, and that information wasn't made known right away. So I think that people are saying, well, when stuff like this happens, maybe 4, 5, 8 months from now, it might come out that, a lot of these people are feds. In what happened in Coeur d'Alene. So like I said, I'll be interested. I don't think so. I was watching the news the other day, and the mother of one of these 29-year-old people who were arrested, surprisingly, he still lives in her basement. I know everybody's going to be shocked by that, but he still lives in her basement. She basically gave him, now, most parents would say, hey, you're part of a white supremacist group. That's 1 strike. And you went out, you traveled 3 states away to go to Idaho to basically be a jerk. At this Pride event, that's 2 strikes. So she didn't just kick him out from that. She basically said on the news, I don't know how she thought this would help, but she said, you can't do any Patriot Front group, you can't do anything with them. You can't do any meetings or any demonstrations with them while you're living here. So I think that's part of the problem. But yeah, the 29-year-old guy who lives in his mom's basement. So she was on the news the other day. Clearly, he's not a Fed. So I have a feeling that most of the people are in his category and not federal agents. Yeah, John Drennan says fire in a crowded theater is dicta, not law. Yeah, no, true. Yeah, that it's not law. However, the Supreme Court has put some limitations on free speech. That is one of them. Okay, so let's see if we get the end of that poll. It looks like it's about 50-50 about people who think that the Patriot Front people should be arrested. So I guess so. Just one more thing on that. What I think is interesting is, so we know hindsight. We know hindsight of what happened, who they are. We know that, because I don't think they had guns. We know what they did. But I wonder if the poll would be different if we were able to somehow do that poll in real time. If we were able just to go there in real time and say, hey, here's what the police officers have. We don't have the benefit of hindsight right now. Should they arrest these people on these misdemeanor charges? Which, again, the law is on the books there. So I wonder what people think about that. And then, obviously, looking at it at hindsight, it looks like it's about 50-50. My guess is that if the question were posed, say, in the moment with what the police knew, that would probably be a little bit higher, saying that the police officers should have arrested these people. That's just what I think, but I'm not sure. Let's see. So James Eccles says, yes, arrest Patriot Fronts, not Antifa and Black Lives Matter rioters. So I think that's, so all of these groups, have different goals. It's never good to group all of them together, but we can group behavior together. So no matter which one of these groups that you're a part of, peacefully protesting is a First Amendment protected activity, and we should all protect it, no matter what, even if we don't like the people are saying. Now, rioting, any type of violence, property damage, we should all be able to say that's bad. So you can hold both things in your mind at the same time. 2 ideas at once. Peaceful protesting is a great thing in America, and we're going to protect it no matter what the people think or are saying. And then also, any type of rioting, violence, property damage, we're all going to say that's bad. And I think most people kind of in the alt middle agree with that, which I think is a reasonable position to have. So the last story that we're going to talk about, well, I have a couple more, but the main last one is, so there's a day camp in Dallas called the Duncanville Fieldhouse, and there were 250 kids at this day camp. It's like this giant field house. I think they have like basketball courts and all kinds of stuff. It's one of those things I think my kid would probably love to go to for summer camp. But they had 250 kids at this summer camp. And this guy, 42-year-old Brandon Keith, he came to the field house and he started firing his gun outside the field house. Well, pretty much in the reports that we're getting, as soon as that happened, the counselors and the people in there started to call the police. They called the police, and the police were, so we're going to do pretty much the opposite. So think of everything that Pete Arredondo and Uvalde did. These guys here in Dallas at the Duncanville Fieldhouse did the exact opposite. So the reports we're getting is they did everything right. They got there within 2 minutes. By the time the police officers got there, the counselors, they did a couple things. They escorted as many kids away from the main door where bad guy was coming in. So that's a good thing that they did right away. And also there's reports that there was a counselor there who actually had a confrontation with the bad guy at the door. So I don't think these counselors are armed or anything like that, but at least one of the civilian counselors, put themselves in harm's way in order to protect the kids. So the bravery there is absolutely, and it is amazing. And that is what we'd love to see from people who are trying to protect kids. So bad guy gets in. He does fire a couple rounds inside the actual field house. Thankfully, no one is hurt or killed or anything like that. Police get there in 2 minutes, which is an absolutely great response time. 2 minutes, they enter right away, and they encounter bad guy in the gymnasium. They exchange gunfire, and it doesn't end up too well for bad guy. So his name is Brandon Keith. He was 42 years old, and he was deceased on scene. No children or anyone else was no children or anybody else was injured or hurt. And that is obviously the goal of this. So when it comes to an active shooter, this is how police officers should behave during an active shooter. This is what the training is. This is what police officers should do. So the response there was unbelievable. Let's see. Nicole Hand said, supposedly Texas has a loophole to keep body camera away from the public if the suspect is dead. So that is a great question or comment, and I don't know. Again, I don't think that's the case. So our legal team, we are going to look into that. But the Texas Attorney General, as I kind of said earlier, I don't know if you were around, Nicole, but the reason he gave for not releasing the body camera footage, at least for Uvalde, was that there was an ongoing investigation. So ongoing investigation, if it's reasonable, that's something that the police, law enforcement officials, it's almost a reasonable reason. But, if someone's dead, well, there's no criminal investigation. There's no trial. You're not saving this for witnesses. Now, could there be civil trials and stuff? Sure. But that's different. That's different than there being a criminal defendant that the state is going to try to prosecute. So the loophole you mentioned about not being able to release if someone is dead, that I don't think that's the case. That doesn't make sense. Not that much of this makes sense, but that doesn't make sense, I don't think. And also, the Texas Attorney General did not cite that. Because it seems like if that was the case, he could have just said that. Hey, this guy's dead, here's the law, sorry guys. So that isn't what he said. They cited ongoing investigation. So that's what I think. Also, when it comes to that active shooter at the Duncanville Fieldhouse in Dallas, they haven't talked about a motive. So there hasn't been a lot on this guy. His picture is out there, but what his actual motives are, we don't know. And a lot of times this happens and people think, well, if there is an active shooter, what can I do? And that's a really great question. I know we had a couple different people ask that, what to do in an active shooter situation. And the best thing you can do is look to local law enforcement, call police, get to a place that is safe. I know local police departments do have information on what you should do in an active shooter situation. So it's hard for me to give specific advice, except, as soon as you can, try to get to a place, just common sense. Try to get to a place that is safe. Try to get everybody as safe as possible. Be a good witness. That's the main thing. And, also call local police so they know something is going on almost immediately. And if you can get away from the shooter, again, it's common sense, but that's the thing to do. But a lot of local police departments would put out information for what they expect or want citizens to do in situations like that. So I don't know if we have any other questions about the shooting or the Duncanville Fieldhouse active shooter. And yeah, so the LG says run, hide, fight. Yeah, I think that's if you're going to put into 3 words, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. I think Daily Wire just did a movie with that title as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, that seems like a reasonable thing. 6 Hours says they should all be fired if they can't do their job. Yeah, if we're talking about Uvalde, Texas, 100%. Fixed Game said it's hot as blazes in Texas. I bet it is. I think it's always hot in Texas. Okay, so do we have any other questions or comments? Definitely go ahead and put it in there about any of these cases that we went over today. And again, I know we have just a lot of different questions coming in that we'd like to get to. So if you drop a super chat, that'll definitely get to the front. We'll be able to see that right away. That definitely helps. It helps our producers go through all of the questions and the content that we're getting. So just a couple of the other things that we might be working on for next week is so there was a case in Arlington, Texas on October 20th of last year where there was an officer-involved shooting. And I'm not going to give too much of it away, but it was an officer-involved shooting in Arlington, Texas, where it was a DWI case, so a drunk driver who just wasn't stopping, kind of a slow speed chase. And we have a police officer who fired into a moving vehicle that was moving towards him kind of at a slow pace. So yesterday, he was actually charged with murder. So we're going to be looking into that case. I also think we're going to be looking into that case, see how much information we can get on that. But cases like that are always interesting to try to see, why were there policies that were violated by the police? Should they have done something different? Or, was this a justified officer-involved shooting? We also have a new video coming out. So essentially, it's a detective being arrested on duty. And that's going to be dropping in the next couple days. So definitely make sure that you like, subscribe, and do all of the notifications on this channel on Cop Watch TV, so you know when those are coming up. That's going to be a great video. And again, if you want to follow me, I'm at Police Law News on TikTok and YouTube. The other case that we might get into at some point is there was a shooting, an officer shooting in Naperville, Illinois, which essentially a police officer who was on a traffic stop, a vehicle who had nothing to do with the traffic stop, an individual stopped right by the officer and basically jumped out of the car and attacked the officer with a hatchet. So we might get into that already, because that is an interesting case as well. So those are some of the main issues in policing and law enforcement that we're going to kind of look at this week. Now, if there are any other stories or questions that you think are interesting that you would like us to cover, definitely put it in the chat and let us know, because we definitely take that into consideration when we're doing research and investigation into these cases to see what people are interested in. So Kiwi Welch says, I don't respect people on TikTok. Well, I kind of respect that, but fine. But you can still go ahead and follow me on TikTok. The way I see, so YouTube is the best, obviously, but the way I see TikTok, it's kind of like a video version of Twitter, and it's fun. So let's see. Do we have any? Okay, so Steve Compton says, dude, please do a deep dive into the El Paso Walmart shooting. Nobody's done it. And I think I know which case that you're talking about. So yeah, so that is something I'm going to look into. So I think if I know correctly, this is the case where essentially the guy was being arrested for shoplifting, and he was kind of give the cops some problem inside the actual Walmart. There's great body cam video and surveillance video of this case. And, as he's being escorted out, they try to handcuff him. There's a fight. And, during the fight, he goes to the ground and he has a firearm. And there's an officer-involved shooting pretty much right there in Walmart near the checkout. So if that's the case that you're talking about, let us know. So I did look into that a little bit when it happened. I think it was sometime in the last 4 or 5 months. I remember looking into that while it happened, but I haven't done one of my videos on it. And I know we haven't covered it here on Cop Watch TV. So one of the things that we do on Cop Watch TV is we love to talk about things that are happening now, news now, in the moment, kind of doing a weekly recap, because everybody thinks that is so interesting. But, we could also talk about other cases that have happened in the past that we definitely might want to get into. Also, there was a tragedy this week. 2 El Monte police officers were killed. I believe that's right outside LA. So we actually have been looking into that as well. I started doing research. Our team started to do research on this in the last couple days because that was a tragedy. 2 young police officers. Between them, they had 5 kids. I believe it was in reference to a domestic violence incident where the woman had the mom had a restraining order against this guy, and she even went as far to go to a hotel to try to get away from him. And he showed up at the hotel, and there was a call for service there. And 2 police officers tragically lost their lives. Again, between the 2 of them, they have 5 kids. I do think there's a couple different foundations set up for them for the families. So we can go ahead and maybe dive deep into more last week. So. Yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining our live and participating. The questions and the comments are really just getting better every week. And yeah, so that's going to conclude the live stream this week. And I hope everybody has a great and safe weekend. Thank you.